Another wonderful win for Alex Eala. Listen to that noise. Thank you, Jasmine, she says. Paolini gracious as ever in defeat.
Nobody saw this coming, and that's exactly what made it unforgettable. 2 million Filipino supporters descended upon California, and that figure alone reveals everything about how dramatically Indian Wells was transformed this year. The BNP Paribas Open, one of tennis's most distinguished and prestigious Masters tournaments, was utterly overwhelmed by the devotees of a 19-year-old whom the WTA establishment still regards as a rising prospect rather than a dominant established force. The Filipino army arrived without waiting for a top-seeded ranking, without a Grand Slam championship backing their player, and without any formal acknowledgement from the gatekeepers of professional tennis, yet they flooded California throughout tournament week regardless. Even Martina Navratilova, a woman who has witnessed this sport evolve across multiple generations and has seen both genuine brilliance and manufactured hype pass through her radar, was left completely stunned.
20-year-old Filipino tennis star Alex Eala has sent Melbourne Park crowds into an absolute frenzy. We'll go live to Ollie Haig, who's in Garden Square for us this evening. Ollie.
The sheer magnitude of what was unfolding around Alex Eala revealed something about women's professional tennis that even a champion of her stature had not quite foreseen. Navratilova's initial reaction was to assess Eala's actual game on court. She described her as crafty, a term carrying considerable weight when it comes from an 8-time Grand Slam champion. Her second observation, however, is where the evaluation took a genuinely unexpected direction, because she pinpointed precisely why Eala, despite all this extraordinary momentum, could still encounter a very real ceiling. This channel dissects what mainstream tennis coverage glosses over, so subscribe now if you haven't already. What Navratilova flagged in Eala's technique is the one element her Filipino army cannot correct from the stands. To fully grasp the significance of what unfolded at the BNP Paribas Open, you need context that most mainstream coverage skipped over entirely. Alex Eala is Filipino-born, developed extensively through the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, and carries a story that resonates profoundly within the Filipino diaspora, one of the largest overseas communities on the planet. There are approximately 4 million Filipinos residing in the United States alone, with a substantial concentration throughout California. When Eala entered the Indian Wells draw, she wasn't merely another young talent attempting to make an impression in a stacked WTA field. For millions of people across California and beyond, she represented something far greater than a tennis ranking. The fan mobilization that followed was anything but spontaneous. Filipino community organizations, supporter clubs operating under the broader Eala Army banner, and diaspora networks across Southern California coordinated attendance campaigns, viewing gatherings, and travel arrangements weeks before the tournament even commenced. Social media groups with hundreds of thousands of members were actively organizing. By the time tournament week arrived, the physical presence of Filipino supporters inside and around the Indian Wells Tennis Garden was impossible to overlook. Practice sessions events that ordinarily attract a few dozen curious spectators were drawing audiences that veterans of the tournament circuit described as genuinely extraordinary. Players warming up on outside courts routinely compete for space on the practice schedule, but Eala's sessions were pulling in crowds that made them feel closer to exhibition showcases. Staff members were reportedly caught completely off guard by the sheer volume of people gathering simply to watch a teenager work through her pre-match preparation. What made this even more remarkable was the organizational discipline of the crowd. These were not chaotic gatherings. Supporters arrived with handmade banners, Philippine flags, coordinated attire, and a familiarity with tennis etiquette that demonstrated this was no casual celebrity audience. It was a legitimate fan base with a genuine comprehension of the sport they were witnessing. That combination of passion and knowledge is uncommon, and it was evident throughout the tournament grounds. The broader figure of 2 million fans references the combined reach of this mobilization in-person attendance, organized statewide viewing events, and documented community gatherings across California throughout the tournament window. This figure circulated extensively through Filipino sports communities and fan networks tracking the Eala effect at the tournament. Whether measured by physical presence or cultural impact, the scale of Filipino support surrounding Eala at Indian Wells had no real equivalent in recent WTA history. Alex Eala was born on May 23, 2005 inches the Philippines. She turned professional in 2021 and has been refining her game along a trajectory that reflects serious long-term planning rather than premature exposure to the senior tour. Her junior career alone signaled genuine elite potential. Eala claimed the 2021 Roland Garros girls singles title, becoming the first Filipino player to win a junior Grand Slam singles championship in the Open era. She reinforced that achievement with the 2022 U.S. Open girls singles title, giving her 2 junior Grand Slam championships before she had even fully settled into senior competition. These were not flukes, they were results built on consistent performance across different surfaces and conditions against the finest junior talent in the world. The transition from junior accomplishment to senior relevance is where most promising players encounter their first genuine obstacle. The WTA Tour is unforgiving. Competition density at every level is formidable, and young players often spend years restructuring their game to meet senior demands. Eala's senior progression, while measured, has demonstrated the kind of steadiness that scouts and analysts associate with players who eventually break into the top tier rather than stall outside it. She has been ascending the WTA rankings with results that reflect genuine competitive growth, not wild upsets or fortunate draws, but accumulated match victories against opponents who challenge every dimension of her game. Her groundstroke construction is sophisticated for her age, particularly her capacity to generate angles from the baseline that push opponents into uncomfortable situations. Her court coverage is above average, and her tactical decision-making in extended rallies displays the kind of chess player thinking that coaches spend years attempting to cultivate in young professionals. The Rafa Nadal Academy background is worth acknowledging here. Players who develop within that system tend to share a common foundation: high physical conditioning standards, relentless baseline discipline, and an ability to manage extended points without surrendering competitive focus. Eala fits that profile. Her fitness levels and mental composure under pressure are frequently highlighted by analysts observing her matches as qualities that distinguish her from peers at a comparable stage of career development. By the time Indian Wells 2025 arrived, Eala had assembled enough of a professional record that her presence in the draw wasn't a narrative constructed purely on potential. There were actual results on the board that warranted attention from those following the WTA Tour. Martina Navratilova's career statistics require no lengthy introduction for any serious tennis audience: 18 Grand Slam singles titles, 31 Grand Slam titles across singles, doubles, and mixed doubles, and a span of competitive dominance stretching from the mid-1970s through the early 2000s. Navratilova is not a commentator who offers vague encouragement. When she evaluates a player's game publicly, the substance of that evaluation carries genuine weight within the sport. Her response to Eala's Indian Wells moment was shaped by 2 distinct observations, and it is important to understand both rather than fixating on one at the expense of the other. The first observation was genuinely affirming. Navratilova used the word crafty to characterize Eala's approach on court. In the context of professional tennis analysis, crafty is not a backhanded compliment, it is a specific acknowledgement of tactical intelligence. A crafty player reads the court well, constructs points deliberately rather than relying purely on power or pace, and understands how to exploit the opponent's positioning against them. Navratilova identifying this quality in a 19-year-old is meaningful because courtcraft is often the final attribute to fully develop in young professionals, not the first. The second observation is where Navratilova's assessment became a genuine talking point. She identified Eala's serve as the area of her game requiring the most substantial development before she could compete consistently at the deepest levels of the WTA Tour. This is not a minor technical footnote. At elite professional level, the serve functions as the foundational weapon that establishes everything else. A player with a limited serve faces a structural disadvantage against top opponents who can read and return it comfortably, regardless of how intelligent or well-constructed the remainder of their game might be. Navratilova's specific concern centered on the absence of a dominant serve weapon in Eala's current arsenal. Eala can place her serve and vary it reasonably well, but the pace and capacity to generate free points on first serve, what coaches and analysts refer to as serve dominance, is not yet at the level demanded by the top 20 of the WTA rankings. Against opponents ranked outside the top 50, this gap is manageable. Against players who consistently occupy the top 10, it becomes a match-defining liability. What made Navratilova's assessment resonate across tennis circles is that it was not delivered as discouragement. It was framed as in candid identification of the one specific gap standing between where Eala is now and where her talent suggests she could reach. A legend pointing at a specific, correctable problem is not a verdict, it is a roadmap. The conversation surrounding Eala following Indian Wells has divided into two distinct camps within the tennis community. The first camp points to her junior Grand Slam titles, her age, her academy background, and the sheer pace of her senior development as evidence that she is tracking toward a top 2-0 career at minimum, with a legitimate ceiling beyond that if her serve development accelerates. This group views the Filipino fan support not as noise surrounding a mid-tier player, but as early recognition of a future major contender. The argument is that fan bases of this magnitude do not organize around players without genuine substance, and the 2 million-strong California mobilization reflects instinct developed through watching someone compete with authentic, elite-level potential. The second camp is more measured. They point to the history of junior Grand Slam champions who never converted that promise into senior relevance, the serve vulnerability Navratilova identified, and the brutal depth of the current WTA Tour as reasons to temper expectations. The women's game right now features exceptional talent across a wider age range than at almost any point in the modern era, and breaking into the top 20 demands not just potential but consistent, fully developed weapons across every phase of the game. Both camps agree on one thing: the Indian Wells moment was real, the fan support was real, and Navratilova's interest in Eala's development is real. For a 9-year-old still ascending into the broader consciousness of the tennis world, having those three factors converge simultaneously at one of the sport's most prestigious events is a moment that does not arrive by coincidence. The serve development Navratilova identified as the gap in Eala's game is not permanent, it is trainable. Players have rebuilt and transformed their serving at this stage of career development before, and Eala's academy environment is precisely the kind of structure where that work gets executed with the right resources behind it. If the next 12 months show measurable progress in that specific area, the conversation around her ceiling will shift considerably. The Filipino army that took over California did not simply show up to celebrate where Eala stands right now. They showed up because they already believe they know where she is headed. That is the complete picture, the fan mobilization that shook Indian Wells, the genuine substance behind Navratilova's reaction, and the one technical gap that will ultimately determine whether Eala fulfills what her supporters already regard as inevitable. If this kind of detailed, unfiltered analysis is what you want from tennis coverage, the subscribe button is right there. Every week, this channel goes deeper than the headlines, cuts through the noise, and delivers the analysis that serious tennis fans are not finding anywhere else. Drop your perspective in the comments below. Is Navratilova right about the serve? Is the Filipino army seeing something the WTA establishment is still overlooking? The conversation continues down there, and this channel reads every single one. Subscribe, comment, and share